Story 1. The carnival had rolled into Jackson like a whirlwind of color and sound, its vibrant atmosphere wrapping around me like a warm blanket. The smell of popcorn and cotton candy mingled in the air, pulling me deeper into the chaos of laughter and excitement. Families strolled hand in hand, their faces illuminated by flickering lights, while the distant sound of carnival music played a familiar tune that seemed to echo the very heartbeat of the evening. I felt a rush of exhilaration as I joined my friends, Mike and Lucy, weaving through the crowd, our spirits high and our hearts racing. "Did you hear about the haunted ride?" Mike asked, his eyes sparkling with mischief as we approached the entrance of the attraction, a rickety structure that loomed ominously against the twilight sky. "They say it's been cursed or something." Lucy rolled her eyes, but I could see the curiosity bubbling underneath her bravado. "Cursed or not, it's just a ride. Come on, let's do it." We exchanged excited glances, the thrill of the unknown urging us forward. As we stepped closer, the flickering lights of the haunted house danced like fireflies, casting unsettling shadows on the ground. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I brushed it off, attributing it to the brisk evening air. "Last one in is a rotten egg," I shouted, darting ahead, my laughter ringing out as I pushed through the tattered entrance. The moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, the sounds of the carnival fading into a distant hum. "Sarah, wait up," Mike called, his voice echoing in the dark. I paused, glancing back at them, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of the ride's neon lights. My heart raced with a mix of anticipation and fear. "Are you guys scared?" I teased, trying to mask my own nerves with bravado. "Just trying to catch up with you," Lucy shot back, her tone playful but edged with uncertainty. As we moved deeper into the haunted house, the decor shifted from whimsical to sinister. Cobwebs clung to the corners and animatronic figures lurked in the shadows, their lifeless eyes seemingly watching our every move. I couldn't help but giggle nervously, but the laughter felt hollow compared to the vibrant joy outside. "I swear I heard something," Mike whispered, glancing over his shoulder. The flickering lights cast eerie patterns on the walls, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Relax, it's just part of the act," I replied, though my voice trembled slightly. "They want to scare us. It's all for fun." As we rounded a corner, I stumbled upon an old carnival memorabilia room, filled with dusty relics and faded photographs. A shiver of excitement coursed through me. "Look at this stuff. It's like a time capsule," I exclaimed, stepping closer to examine a cracked mirror and a rusting Ferris wheel model. "Creepy," Lucy said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I feel like we're not supposed to be here." "Come on, it's just old junk," I replied, my curiosity pushing me to explore further. The tension in the air began to thicken, and a sense of dread lingered just beyond my awareness. Suddenly, a loud crackling noise erupted from the ceiling, puncturing the silence like a gunshot. My heart dropped as sparks flew, illuminating the room in a brief flash of blinding light. Panic surged through me and I turned to run, but the unmistakable scent of smoke began to fill the space, choking my breath. "Sarah, we have to get out," Mike shouted, his voice laced with fear. I whipped around, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Where's the exit?" I screamed, but as I glanced back, the way we had come was now obscured by thick, swirling smoke. The once familiar path transformed into a maze of confusion and terror. "Stay close," I yelled, but the shadows seemed to envelop us, their grasp tightening as our laughter faded into desperate cries for help. My heart raced, each beat echoing the growing sense of dread that something sinister was about to unfold in the darkness around us. The moment we stepped into the haunted house, a chill ran down my spine. The heavy wooden door creaked ominously as it swung open, revealing a dimly lit corridor shrouded in an unsettling darkness. I could hear the distant echoes of eerie sounds, ghostly moans, clanking chains, and the occasional cackle of animatronic figures hidden in the shadows. At first, it was thrilling. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I exchanged nervous laughter with Mike and Lucy. "Just look at that creepy clown. It's like it's staring right at us," Mike said, pointing toward a dilapidated clown figure that seemed to leer from the corner. Its paint was cracked, and its smile was more ghastly than entertaining. "Maybe it knows you've been skipping your math homework," Lucy teased, nudging him playfully. "Very funny. Let's just keep moving before I decide to haunt you both," Mike shot back, and I laughed, grateful for the lighthearted banter. As we ventured deeper into the haunted house, the atmosphere shifted. The air felt thicker, almost oppressive, and I could sense an undercurrent of unease. We stumbled upon a hidden room, its entrance concealed behind a tattered curtain. Curiosity piqued, we pushed the fabric aside, revealing a small space filled with old carnival memorabilia, faded posters, rusted Ferris wheel cars, and dusty stuffed animals that looked like they hadn't seen the light of day in decades. "Wow, look at this stuff!" I exclaimed, running my fingers over a weathered poster advertising a long-forgotten magic show. "It's like stepping back in time." "This place is a treasure trove of creepiness," Lucy said, her eyes wide as she examined a cracked mirror that seemed to distort our reflections. "I can't believe they just left all this here." Suddenly, a loud crackling noise echoed above us, followed by a flash of sparks. My heart leaped into my throat as we all froze, staring up in horror. The flickering lights overhead sputtered violently, and I felt the air grow heavy with an unsettling heat. "Did you see that?" Mike yelled, his voice tinged with panic. "We need to get out of here." I turned to the entrance, but my heart sank as I realized the way we came in was now blocked by fallen debris. "No. The exit!" I shouted, my voice trembling. "It's blocked." The room seemed to shrink around us, the once fun atmosphere turning suffocatingly claustrophobic. We stumbled backward, trying to catch our breath as the crackling intensified. I could see fear mirrored in Lucy's eyes as we grasped each other's hands tightly. "Stay close," I urged, my voice barely a whisper. "We have to find another way out." As we darted through the room, I spotted a narrow passageway at the far end. "Over there." "Let's go." I pointed, leading the way. My heart pounded in my chest as we squeezed through the tight space, the sounds of chaos vibrating through the walls. "Sarah, wait," Mike called out, but I was already moving forward, driven by desperation. The passage twisted and turned, and I could hear the distant sounds of laughter from the carnival outside, a stark contrast to the nightmare we were trapped in. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed behind us, followed by a rush of heat that made us all gasp. "Hurry," I urged, pushing myself forward as fear gripped my insides. The flickering lights around us began to dim, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. "Is this even real?" Lucy whimpered, her voice shaky. "This can't be happening." I wanted to reassure her, to tell her that everything would be okay, but the truth was I was terrified. Panic settled in my chest like a heavy weight, and I could feel the walls closing in. We finally burst into another room, only to find ourselves in a dead end. The door we had hoped would lead us to safety was reinforced and locked tight. "What do we do now?" Mike gasped, his eyes wide with fear. "Maybe we can break it down," Lucy suggested, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "No, we can't," I shouted, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on us. "We have to think." As we huddled together, the crackling noise intensified, and the air grew thick with smoke. The realization of our dire situation hit me hard. We were trapped, and the darkness was closing in. The air was thick with smoke, a choking cloud that wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. My heart raced as I stumbled blindly through the chaos, the screams of my friends echoing in my ears. "Sarah, where are you?" Mike's voice cut through the haze, frantic and desperate. I knew that voice. It was a lifeline in this hellish nightmare. "Mike," I shouted, my voice hoarse from the smoke. I strained to hear him, my senses heightened by the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The flickering lights of the haunted ride cast grotesque shadows on the walls, and the acrid scent of burning wood filled my nostrils. Panic surged within me as I fought to push through the thickening smoke. "I'm coming," I yelled, trying to follow the sound of his voice. But the darkness was disorienting, and every time I thought I was making progress, the walls seemed to shift, trapping me further inside. The laughter and thrill of the carnival outside felt like a distant memory, replaced by the suffocating reality of our entrapment. "Lucy, where are you?" I called out, but the silence that followed was deafening. Then I heard it again, Mike's voice louder this time, tinged with fear. "Sarah, over here." I turned, pushing past a tangle of debris that had fallen from the ceiling. The air was getting hotter, flames licking at the edges of my vision. Every instinct screamed for me to run, but I couldn't leave him behind. I had to find him. "Mike, I'm coming." I coughed, trying to steady my breathing. The smoke was thickening, swirling like a living creature, and I could feel the heat radiating from somewhere close. I stumbled into what felt like a corridor, the walls warm to the touch. I could see flickers of orange light ahead and moved toward it, praying it was the way out. "Sarah." His voice was closer now, and my heart leaped with hope. I rushed forward, my hands outstretched in front of me, desperate to find him. Just as I rounded the corner, a wave of heat slammed into me, and I froze for a split second, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. "Sarah." Mike's voice was frantic now, filled with a terror that sent chills down my spine. "Please help me. I can't get out." I pushed through the last remnants of my fear and moved toward the sound of his voice. "I'm here," I shouted, my voice cracking. I could see him now, silhouetted against the flames, trapped beneath a beam that had fallen from the ceiling. My heart sank. "Hold on, I'm coming." I rushed to him, the heat radiating off the flames causing beads of sweat to form on my forehead. "What do I do?" I shouted, kneeling beside him. He was struggling, panic in his eyes as he tried to free himself. Just lift it," he gasped, his voice strained. I grabbed the beam, my muscles screaming in protest as I heaved with all my might. The flames danced closer, and I could feel the heat singeing my skin. "Come on, Sarah. You can do it." With a final push, I managed to shift the beam just enough for him to squirm free. "Got it?" he gasped, stumbling to his feet. But before we could move, a loud crack echoed through the room, and I felt a surge of terror wash over me as another beam began to fall. "Run!" I screamed, adrenaline propelling us forward. We sprinted down the corridor, the flames licking at our heels, the sound of chaos ringing in our ears. I could see the exit up ahead, a faint glimmer of hope amidst the inferno. "Lucy. We need to find Lucy," Mike shouted, but I could barely think. All that mattered was getting out alive. "We'll find her," I promised, my heart pounding against my ribcage as we raced toward the light, our escape shrouded in smoke and fear. But as we neared the exit, the ceiling groaned ominously, and I felt a deep sense of dread settle in my stomach. "It's going to collapse," I yelled, the panic in my voice clear. "Go. Just go," Mike urged, pushing me forward as he turned back to look for Lucy. I wanted to scream for him to come with me, but the words were lost in the chaos. I stumbled through the door, the night air hitting me like a tidal wave, and I fell to my knees on the grass outside the ride. I turned back, eyes wide with horror as I watched the flames consume the haunted house, the acrid smell of smoke filling my lungs. "Mike!" I screamed, but the flames roared back, swallowing his voice. The night was alive with sirens and chaos, but all I could hear was the silence of the friends I might never see again. The morning sun pierced through my bedroom window, its rays illuminating the dust particles swirling in the air. I squinted, trying to shake off the lingering heaviness of the night before. The remnants of that horrific evening still clung to my mind like smoke, thick and suffocating. I rolled onto my side, hoping to escape the memories that haunted me, but they came rushing back like a flood, each wave heavier than the last. I had survived, but what did that really mean? The town was in mourning, and I felt like an intruder in my own life. I sat up, the sheets tangling around my legs, and glanced at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, dark circles underneath them a testament to the nightmares that plagued me. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "You're okay, Sarah. You're okay." But deep down I knew I wasn't. I decided to call Lucy. Maybe talking would help. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed her number, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. When she answered, her voice was shaky but relieved. "Sarah? I was just thinking about you." "Hey Lucy. I don't know how to do this. I keep seeing it, you know? The fire. The screams." My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. "I know. I can't stop seeing it either. It feels like it was just yesterday." There was a pause, a heavy silence that stretched between us. "Did you have that dream again?" "Yes. It was worse this time. I was trapped and I couldn't find you or Mike. It was just darkness and flames." I felt the tears welling up, threatening to spill over. What if we could have done something? What if we could have saved them? "Sarah, it wasn't our fault. We didn't know it was going to happen," she said softly, but her words felt hollow. I could hear the tremor in her voice, the uncertainty that we were both grappling with. Maybe we should look into what happened." "I found some old newspaper articles that mention strange things about the haunted ride," Lucy suggested, her tone shifting from despair to determination. "I think there's more to it than just an accident." "Like what?" I asked, curious despite the heaviness in my heart. "I don't know yet. But I'll come over and we can go through them together." "Okay," I replied, feeling a flicker of hope. "I'll make some coffee." After hanging up, I paced the small confines of my room, my thoughts racing. What had really happened that night? Was it just an electrical failure, or was there something more sinister lurking in the shadows? I remembered the flickering lights, the ominous sounds echoing through the haunted house. Each detail replayed in my mind like a broken record. When Lucy arrived, the air was thick with tension. We sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of old newspapers, their yellowed pages crinkling under our fingers. "Look at this," Lucy said, pointing to an article that detailed a previous accident at the same carnival. "This isn't the first time something bad has happened here." I leaned closer, my heart racing as I read the words. It says here that there were reports of faulty wiring and complaints about the safety conditions. How did we not know this? Maybe they covered it up, Lucy replied, her brow furrowing. Or people just forgot. But this feels like more than just bad luck. We continued poring over the articles, piecing together a timeline of events that seemed to lead us deeper into a web of mystery. Each story we uncovered spoke of strange occurrences, whispers of a curse that had followed the carnival for years. Look at this one, Lucy said, her finger tracing the headline. It mentions a fire that killed 2 performers a decade ago. They said it was the result of an unexplainable phenomenon. What does that even mean? I don't know, but it sounds like something out of a horror movie, I said, my stomach churning. The thought of a curse sent chills down my spine. Just then my phone rang, jolting us both. It was Mike. I hesitated for a moment before answering, my heart racing. Hey Mike. Sarah. I need to talk to you. Can we meet? His voice was urgent, laced with a desperation that made me uneasy. Sure. Where? I felt my pulse quicken as uncertainty washed over me. I'll text you the address. It's important, he said before hanging up abruptly. What did he want? Lucy asked, her eyes wide with concern. I don't know. But he sounded different, I murmured. The unease in my gut deepened. I think we should go. As we prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we were about to uncover would change everything. The shadows of our past loomed larger than ever, and I could feel an unsettling presence wrapping around us, whispering secrets that begged to be revealed. The dim light of the late afternoon spilled into my living room, casting long shadows across the floor as I sat on the couch, my heart heavy with grief and confusion. The weight of the past few weeks had settled on me like a thick fog, and I could hardly breathe under its suffocating grasp. My phone buzzed beside me, breaking the silence, and I instinctively reached for it, hoping for some distraction. It was Lucy. Hey Sarah, can we meet? I think we need to talk, she said, her voice trembling slightly over the line. Sure, where? I replied, feeling a mix of dread and curiosity. I had a feeling that whatever she wanted to discuss would only deepen the shadows in my mind. Let's meet at the park. You know, the one near the old carousel, she suggested. The carousel? The very place where we used to laugh and play as children, a stark contrast to the darkness that now engulfed our lives. Okay. I'll be there in a bit, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. When I arrived, the park felt eerily quiet. The leaves rustled gently in the breeze, but the laughter of children was absent, replaced instead by an unsettling stillness. Lucy was sitting on a bench, her back to me, staring at the ground. As I approached, I could see her fingers trembling slightly. Hey, I said softly, taking a seat beside her. What's going on? I found something, she started, her voice barely audible. I've been digging into the history of that haunted ride, and I think we might be in danger. Danger? What do you mean? Panic began to rise in my chest. Look, she said, pulling out a crumpled newspaper clipping from her bag. This article talks about previous incidents at the carnival. There were fires before, Sarah. And accidents that were never reported properly. I took the article from her hands, scanning the faded text. My heart sank as the details unfolded. A history of negligence, of things being swept under the rug. Why didn't we know about this? Why didn't anyone tell us? I felt anger bubbling up inside me. I don't know. But there's more, Lucy continued, her eyes wide with fear. I started getting these messages, anonymous texts warning me to stop looking into it. Messages? What did they say? I asked, gripping the edge of the bench. Just vague threats. Like, leave it alone, and you won't like what you find. Lucy, that's terrifying. What if they know we're investigating? What if they're watching us? The thought sent chills down my spine. We need to gather everyone and talk about this, she insisted, her determination igniting a spark of courage within me. Mike, Jenna, and even Daryl. We can't let this go. I nodded, feeling a mix of fear and resolve. Okay, let's call them. As we made plans, the shadows around us seemed to deepen, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. That evening, we met at Mike's house, the air thick with tension as the 4 of us gathered around the kitchen table. Lucy found something, I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. There have been other incidents at the carnival and we've been getting threats. Jenna's eyes widened. Threats? What are you talking about? Messages warning us to stop our investigation, Lucy explained, her voice trembling slightly. We need to be careful. Daryl leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You really think someone's targeting us? It sounds a bit paranoid, don't you think? No, it's not paranoid, I shot back, feeling a mix of frustration and fear. This is serious. We need to figure out what's going on before it's too late. Mike, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Maybe we should just drop it. It's been weeks since the fire. Can't we just move on? Move on. I echoed, incredulous. 7 of our friends died, Mike. We can't just forget about them. As the words hung in the air, an uncomfortable silence settled over us. I could feel the weight of our shared trauma pressing down, each of us grappling with our own guilt and fear. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, breaking the tension. I glanced at the screen and my heart dropped. An unknown number. My hands shook as I answered. Hello? Stop looking or you'll regret it, a voice hissed before the call abruptly ended. I looked around the table, my breath quickening. They know, I whispered, the reality of our situation crashing down on me. They're watching us. The air inside the abandoned warehouse felt thick with tension as we gathered under the flickering fluorescent lights, the shadows dancing eerily across the walls. I could feel my heart race, a mix of anticipation and dread coursing through my veins. Mike had called us here, claiming he had proof that would finally shed light on the darkness that had haunted our lives since that fateful night at the carnival. Where is he? I asked, my voice shaky as I turned to Lucy and Sarah. They looked just as anxious as I felt, their eyes darting around the expanse of space, searching for any sign of our friend. I don't know, Lucy replied, her brow furrowed. He said he'd be here. Maybe he got scared. Scared of what? I snapped, instantly regretting my tone. It wasn't Lucy's fault. We were all on edge. Just then, a rustling sound came from the far end of the warehouse. We turned, our breaths caught in our throats as a figure stepped into the dim light. It was Mike, his face obscured by shadows, but I could see the tension in his posture. He looked different, almost unrecognizable. Sorry I'm late, he said, his voice low and strained. I had to make sure I wasn't followed. Followed? By who? Sarah asked, stepping forward, her voice a mixture of concern and anger. By them, he said, his eyes wide with a fear I hadn't seen before. The ones who want to keep the truth buried. I can't explain everything right now, but I have something you need to see. He produced a small, battered envelope from his jacket pocket and held it out to me, his hands trembling. I took it, my fingers brushing against his, and a chill ran down my spine. What is this? I asked, feeling the weight of the envelope in my hands. Evidence, he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. Evidence that will change everything. I tore the envelope open, my heart pounding as I pulled out a series of photographs. The first one showed the haunted ride engulfed in flames, a sight I had seen before but never like this. The angle was different, capturing the chaos from an outsider's perspective. Where did you get these? I demanded, my voice rising. Who took these? It doesn't matter, Mike said, his eyes darting around nervously. What matters is what's in the next one. I flipped to the next photo, my breath hitching in my throat. It was a picture of the ride's control panel, the wires charred and burnt, but more importantly, there was a figure in the corner, someone I recognized. Is that you? I stammered, looking at Mike, whose face paled as he stepped back. No. That's not me, he shouted, his voice cracking. That's someone else. Someone who wanted to sabotage the ride. Sabotage? Lucy echoed, her voice trembling. You mean someone set the fire on purpose? Yes. No. I mean... He paused, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I don't know. But I was there that night. I saw things, heard things. My mind raced. What do you mean you were there? You were with us the whole time. Was I? He snapped, the anger in his voice echoing through the empty warehouse. Do you really think it's that simple? You think I orchestrated it? Wait, Sarah interjected, her voice steady despite the chaos. You're saying you saw someone else in the ride? Who? I don't know, he shouted again, but then his voice dropped to a whisper. But I think it was someone we knew. The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. It felt like a damning revelation, one that could shatter our fragile bond. Mike, I said slowly, what are you trying to say? I'm saying, he hesitated, glancing down at the ground. I'm saying I think it was one of us. A chill ran down my spine and I felt the world tilt beneath me. What? No. It can't be. But as I looked around at my friends, their faces pale and drawn, I felt a creeping doubt. The shadows in the corners seemed to whisper secrets, and the past clawed its way back into my mind, the events of that night swirling in a haze of grief and regret. Who? Lucy's voice was barely a whisper, yet it echoed loudly in the emptiness around us. Someone who wanted to be the center of attention, Mike whispered, his eyes locking with mine. Someone who thought the only way to stand out was to cause chaos. My heart sank as the realization hit me. No, it can't be. But deep down I knew. I could feel the truth clawing its way to the surface, and as I stood there, surrounded by my friends, I felt utterly shattered. The haunting presence of our past loomed over us, darker than ever. The shadows were closing in, and the truth was more horrifying than I had ever imagined. Story 2. The summer fair had a way of transforming Omaha into a kaleidoscope of color and sound. As I walked through the entrance, the scent of caramel popcorn and cotton candy enveloped me, instantly igniting a sense of nostalgia. I could hear the laughter of children mingling with the upbeat music that floated through the air. But beneath the gleeful facade, I sensed an undercurrent of tension that prickled at my skin. I maneuvered through the throngs of excited fairgoers, my notebook tucked under my arm, ready to capture the stories hidden within this celebration. I was here to interview carnival workers, to unveil the life behind the glimmering lights and vibrant rides. As I approached a group of workers setting up the Ferris wheel, I felt a chill breeze sweep through as though it were a warning from the sky. "Excuse me," I called out, catching the attention of a burly man with grease-streaked arms. He paused, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I'm Samantha, a journalist. Mind sharing a bit about your work here?" He hesitated, glancing at his colleagues before nodding. "Sure, but it's just your typical fair stuff, you know? Long hours, hard work." "Right," I said, sensing the reluctance in his voice. "But there must be more to it. What's it like maintaining rides like the Ferris wheel?" His eyes darted to the towering structure, its metal frame creaking ominously as it swayed slightly in the wind. It's a lot. Safety checks, inspections. We do our best, but sometimes things slip through the cracks," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Things slip through the cracks?" I echoed, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Before he could respond, a woman in a bright blue uniform, her hair tied back in a tight bun, interrupted us. "Don't listen to him, Samantha. We've got everything under control here. Just enjoy the fair, all right?" I nodded slowly, my instincts telling me there was more beneath the surface. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to make my way to the Ferris wheel, where families were lining up, eager for a ride. I spotted a father standing nearby, his young daughter bouncing on her toes, excitement radiating from her. "Hey there. What do you think of the Ferris wheel?" I asked, approaching them. "It's her favorite," he exclaimed, ruffling his daughter's hair. "Aren't you, sweetie?" "Yeah." "Can we go now, Daddy?" she chirped, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "It's a great ride," he said, albeit a bit hesitantly. "Just hope it holds up." "Hold up?" I prompted, sensing his unease. He sighed, glancing at the ride. "I don't know. It makes these weird noises sometimes. Like it's straining or something. But hey, it's a fair. You can't let fear ruin the fun, right?" I smiled, but his words gnawed at me. "True, but safety should always come first," I replied, my journalist instincts kicking in. "Have you seen anything that concerns you?" Before he could answer, a dark cloud rolled in overhead, casting a shadow over the fairgrounds. The atmosphere shifted, and I felt an unsettling chill creep up my spine. The laughter faded slightly, replaced by murmurs of unease among the crowd. "Looks like we might get some rain," I said, trying to lighten the mood, but the father's expression turned serious. "Yeah, let's hope it holds off. It's supposed to be a fun day for her," he said, nodding towards his daughter, who was obliviously tugging at his sleeve, urging him to get in line. As the Ferris wheel began to spin, my heart raced, not just from the excitement of the fair, but from the unsettling thoughts brewing in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. I took a deep breath, determined to uncover the truths hidden behind the cheerful chaos, not knowing that the fair's joy would soon turn into a nightmare that none of us could foresee. The day had started like any other, filled with laughter, the smell of popcorn, and the bright colors of carnival lights. But as I stood there, the excitement of the fair quickly morphed into an ominous sense of dread. The Ferris wheel loomed over the grounds like a giant, creaking sentinel, and I could feel an unsettling energy in the air. I was supposed to be capturing moments of joy, but instead I felt like I was watching a ticking time bomb. I had just finished interviewing a group of workers when I noticed Mark, a father I had seen earlier, standing near the Ferris wheel with his daughter. She was giggling, her face painted like a butterfly, completely oblivious to the danger that lurked behind the smiles. I could see the tension etched on Mark's face as he looked up at the ride. "You sure it's safe?" he had asked one of the workers earlier, his voice low, almost a whisper. The worker had shrugged it off, but I could tell Mark wasn't convinced. As the Ferris wheel began to turn, I instinctively reached for my camera, capturing the joyous faces of the riders. But my heart sank when I heard the first ominous creak, a sound that pierced through the laughter like a knife. I zoomed in on Mark, who was now gripping the safety bar with white knuckles, his eyes wide as he watched his daughter in her cabin. "Hold on tight, sweetie," he shouted, trying to mask his worry with a brave smile. Then it happened, a violent jolt that sent the Ferris wheel shaking. I stumbled backwards, my camera still trained on the scene as screams erupted around me. The world seemed to slow down as I watched in horror. Mark's daughter was thrown from her cabin, her small body flailing in the air. "No, Emily." Mark's voice cut through the chaos, raw and desperate. He lunged forward, but the crowd was a wall of panic, people pushing and shoving, all trying to escape the horror unfolding before us. I felt my heart race as I instinctively pressed the record button on my camera, capturing the chaos. The screams, the cries for help, the panicked faces, all of it felt surreal. The Ferris wheel was still spinning, but now it was a twisted carnival of agony. I could barely hear anything over the cacophony, but I could see Mark collapsing on the ground, his hands grasping at the dirt, his eyes searching for his daughter. "Emily, where are you? Somebody call for help." I yelled, my voice barely audible above the din. I was just a journalist, but in that moment I felt a surge of responsibility. I couldn't just stand there, I had to do something. I rushed toward Mark, desperate to reach him through the throng of panicked fairgoers. "Mark, I'm here," I shouted, breaking through the crowd. He looked up, his face a mask of anguish, and for a brief moment time seemed to freeze. "I can't find her. She was right there." His voice cracked, each word dripping with despair. "I'll help you," I replied, feeling a sense of urgency grip my chest. We pushed through the crowd together, and I glanced up at the Ferris wheel, now eerily still, but the aftermath was unfolding like a nightmare. As we reached the base of the ride, I could see the chaos around us. People running, emergency services arriving, and the haunting cries of those who had witnessed the horror. My camera was still rolling, capturing the reality of the tragedy, but I felt a heaviness in my stomach, realizing the weight of what I would have to document. "Emily," Mark screamed again, his voice breaking. I could see the panic in his eyes, and it pierced through me. I didn't know how to comfort him. Words felt inadequate in the face of such a profound loss. Then, as if time started moving again, the sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as they approached. I could see medics rushing toward the Ferris wheel, and a part of me wanted to turn away, to stop recording and to just help. But I couldn't. I was a journalist, and this was my story. Yet, as I captured the horror unfolding in front of me, I felt something shift deep within. This was no longer just a story, it was an unfolding tragedy that would change lives forever. I could feel the weight of the world pressing down on my shoulders, and I knew that the truth behind this disaster was far from over. Dark clouds still loomed over Omaha, their heavy presence matching the weight in my heart. I stood in front of the Ferris wheel, now a twisted metal skeleton, a haunting reminder of the lives shattered just days prior. The community, once vibrant with laughter and excitement, was draped in mourning. I could feel the pain in the air, thick and suffocating. As a journalist, I had covered tragedies before, but none had hit so close to home. I could still hear the echoes of screams, the sound of my camera rolling as I captured the chaos. Mark was there too, a shadow of the man I'd met at the fair. His eyes, once full of life, now carried the burden of grief. He paced back and forth, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. It was as if he were trying to physically expel the agony that consumed him. I approached him cautiously. "Mark," I started, my voice barely a whisper against the heavy silence. "I know this is hard, but I think we need to talk about what happened." He stopped, his gaze piercing through me like a dagger. "What's there to talk about, Samantha? My daughter is gone. I should have done something, anything, to protect her." His voice cracked, revealing the raw emotion beneath his anger. "None of this was your fault," I replied, my heart aching for him. "There were safety violations, negligence. We need to find out who is responsible for this." Mark's eyes narrowed, and I could see the flicker of determination ignite within him. "You really think you can find something? They'll just cover it up like they always do." I nodded, feeling the fire of resolve burning inside me as well. "I have to try, for your daughter and for all the others who were hurt. We can't let them get away with this." "Then let's do it," he said, his voice steadier now. "Let's find the truth." The next few days were a blur of interviews, phone calls, and late nights spent poring over documents. I dug through inspection reports and safety records, uncovering a timeline of negligence that sent chills down my spine. Each revelation felt like a piece of a puzzle falling into place, but it was also a reminder of the lives it cost. "Look at this," I exclaimed one afternoon, slamming down a folder on the table in front of Mark. This inspection report shows that the Ferris wheel was flagged for repairs months ago, but they never did anything. They just kept it running. Mark's jaw tightened as he read the document, rage simmering beneath the surface. How could they do this? How could they put profits over people's lives? Because they can, I replied, my voice low. There's a connection here, Mark. The Carnival owner, he's got ties with some city officials. They're turning a blind eye to safety regulations. Mark's expression shifted from anger to determination. Then we need to find out more about him. Who is this owner? I pulled out a newspaper clipping I had found during my search. His name is Leonard Hayes. He's been running carnivals for years and he's had complaints before. But nothing ever seems to stick. Let's pay him a visit, Mark said, his voice firm. I want to confront him. He needs to feel the weight of what he's done. Are you sure that's a good idea? I asked, concern creeping into my tone. We don't know how he'll react. I don't care, he replied, his eyes blazing with emotion. I need answers. I owe it to my daughter. As we made our way to the Carnival's makeshift office, the air felt electric with tension. I could sense Mark's mounting fury, and it only fueled my own determination. We arrived at the office, a shabby trailer parked near the entrance of the fairgrounds. I knocked on the door and a moment later, it swung open to reveal Leonard Hayes, a middle-aged man with a slicked-back hairstyle and an unsettling smirk. Can I help you? He asked, feigning ignorance as he leaned against the doorframe. Mr. Hayes, I began, trying to keep my voice steady despite the anger bubbling within me. We need to talk about the Ferris wheel. He chuckled lightly, brushing off the seriousness of our inquiry. Ah yes. Tragic accident, wasn't it? Terrible luck. Mark stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare call it luck. You know what your negligence has cost. You're responsible. Leonard's smile faded, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. Look, I'm not required to answer to you. Accidents happen in this business. It's unfortunate, but... Unfortunate? Mark interrupted, barely able to contain his rage. You've put profits over safety, and now children are dead because of you. Leonard's eyes darkened, and for a moment, I could see the mask slipping. You should watch your tone, my friend. You don't know who you're dealing with. I felt the weight of his words settle around us, a chilling reminder of the power dynamics we were up against. But I wouldn't back down. I turned to Mark, who was panting with barely contained fury. We're not leaving until we get the truth. Good luck with that, Leonard said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But you'll find that the truth can be a dangerous thing. As he slammed the door in our faces, I could feel the storm brewing both outside and within us. We had stirred the hornet's nest and there would be no turning back now. The air felt thick with tension as I stepped into the Carnival office, the smell of stale popcorn mingling with the faint musk of sweat and grease. The walls were plastered with peeling posters promoting rides that had seen better days. I could hear the distant sounds of laughter and music from outside, a stark contrast to the somber reality of what had just happened. My heart raced as I approached the Carnival owner, a man named Frank Maloney, whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud. Miss Carter, he said, leaning back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. His expression was a mask of feigned concern, but I could see the glint of something else in his eyes, fear perhaps. What brings you here today? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I needed to keep my composure. I'm here about the Ferris wheel incident. People died, Frank. I need to know what went wrong. He chuckled softly, the sound grating against my nerves. Accidents happen in this line of work. It's unfortunate, but we can't predict everything. He waved his hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. Unfortunate? 3 people are dead, and your ride was deemed unsafe months ago. I shot back, anger bubbling under my skin. You can't just brush this off. His smile faltered, and for a moment the mask slipped. Look, Samantha, you're a smart journalist. You know that running a carnival isn't as simple as it seems. There are complexities involved. Complexities? I echoed, incredulous. You call ignoring safety regulations complexities? This isn't just about business, it's about lives. Frank leaned forward, his demeanor shifting. You should be careful with your words. There are bigger players involved here than just me. If you dig too deep, you might unearth things you wish you hadn't. I felt a shiver run down my spine. Are you threatening me? Just advising you to tread lightly. The city has its ways of dealing with troublemakers, he replied, a smirk creeping back onto his face. I stood my ground, my resolve hardening. I'm not going to back down, Frank. Not when people are hurting. As I left his office, my mind raced. The implications of his words lingered, gnawing at me. It wasn't just negligence I was facing. It was a web of corruption that could ensnare anyone who dared to challenge it. I needed to find Mark. When I found him outside the fairgrounds, he looked lost, like a man whose world had shattered overnight. The vibrant colors of the fair seemed to mock his grief. I approached him cautiously. "Mark," I said softly, "I spoke with Frank. He's not taking responsibility. He's trying to deflect blame." Mark's jaw tightened. I wouldn't expect anything less from him. He's a coward. But I heard something. There's a whistleblower, someone who knows what really happened. They're scared to talk though. Do you know how to contact them? I asked, my pulse quickening. He shook his head. A friend of mine knows them. He said they're willing to speak, but they fear retaliation from the carnival. I felt a surge of hope. We need to meet them. This could be the breakthrough we need. Just then my phone buzzed in my pocket, cutting through the tension. I pulled it out and saw an unknown number. My heart sank, but I answered anyway. "Stop your investigation, Samantha. You have no idea what you're getting into," a voice hissed. It was low and menacing, sending chills down my spine. "Who is this?" I demanded, but the line went dead. I looked up at Mark, my hands trembling. "I just received a threat," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, his expression shifting from shock to fierce determination. "They think they can scare us? We can't give up now, Samantha. We owe it to the victims, especially my daughter. We have to meet that whistleblower." I nodded, steeling myself against the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. "You're right. We can't let them silence us." With renewed resolve, we set a plan in motion. But as we prepared to confront the truth, the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on my chest. The stakes were higher than ever, and the shadows of the carnival loomed larger with each passing moment. I sat nervously in my car, my palms slick against the steering wheel, the hum of the engine drowned out by the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. The sun began to dip low on the horizon, casting a warm glow over the city of Omaha, but the beauty of the evening felt hollow to me. I was about to meet the whistleblower, a man whose identity remained a mystery, cloaked in shadows and fear. The phone call had been brief, filled with urgency and a promise of truth, but the weight of what that truth could mean hung heavy in the air. Mark was pacing beside my car, his hands buried deep in his pockets. I could see the tension etched in his features, the way his jaw clenched tightly as if holding in a storm. I rolled down the window, desperate to ease the suffocating silence. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a tumult of emotions, grief, anger, and a flicker of hope. "We need to know, Samantha. I can't just sit back while they cover this up. Not after what happened to her." His voice cracked and I felt my heart twist in sympathy. "I know," I replied. "But if this person is scared enough to hide, what if they change their mind? What if they don't want to talk?" Mark shook his head, the determination burning in his gaze. "Then we push. We can't let fear win. Not anymore." With a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and checked the message from the whistleblower one last time. "Meet at the park," it had said, "near the old carousel." It felt like a scene out of a bad movie, but I had to keep reminding myself that this was real life. People were hurting and we were on the brink of uncovering something that could bring justice. As we approached the park, the fading light illuminated the remnants of a once vibrant funfair. The carousel stood still, its chipped paint and muted colors a stark reminder of the joy that had turned to tragedy. I parked the car and we stepped out, my heart racing with anticipation. "Stay close," I whispered to Mark as we walked toward the carousel. "Yeah, I don't want to lose you," he replied, his eyes scanning the area for any sign of danger. We found a secluded bench, the rusted metal creaking under our weight. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and I could feel the pulse of my heartbeat in my ears. Moments later, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man with a hood pulled low over his face. He approached cautiously, glancing around as if he expected someone to follow him. "Are you Samantha?" he asked, his voice barely above a murmur. I nodded, feeling the gravity of the moment. "And this is Mark." "Yeah," Mark added, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside him. "We're here to listen." The man hesitated, his eyes darting around before he finally took a seat beside us. "I'm not sure how much I can say without putting myself in danger," he confessed, his voice trembling slightly. "Anything you can tell us is important," I urged, leaning forward. "Please, we need to know what really happened with the Ferris wheel." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. The Ferris wheel was flagged for safety violations months before the fair even started. I saw the reports. They knew it was unsafe, but the owner, he didn't care. He wanted to make money, and the city, they turned a blind eye. Mark's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening. How could they let this happen? The owner has connections, the whistleblower continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. He's got friends in high places. They all got paid off to keep quiet. I didn't want to be a part of it, but I was just a worker. I couldn't say anything without losing my job. Then why are you here now? I pressed, sensing the fear in his voice. Because I can't live with what happened, he admitted, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. People died, and it should never have happened. I've lost friends in this too. I need to do something. Before I could respond, Mark's phone buzzed violently in his pocket. He fished it out, his expression shifting from determination to sheer panic. It's the hospital, he breathed, his voice barely audible. It's about my daughter. What? Mark, what do they want? I asked, my heart racing alongside his. They said she's alive, but in critical condition. His voice cracked, and I could see the turmoil in his eyes. I have to go. Wait. I called out, adrenaline coursing through me. We need to go public with this information first. If we don't, I can't think about that right now, he snapped, desperation etched into his features. My daughter needs me. I watched as he tore away toward the parking lot, leaving me alone with the whistleblower, whose expression mirrored the turmoil that Mark was feeling. My thoughts raced. We were so close, and yet everything was falling apart. I felt a sinking sense of dread wash over me. What would it take to finally bring justice to the lives lost? Would Mark's daughter pull through, or would this be yet another tragedy added to the pile? I stepped into the packed auditorium, the air thick with tension and murmurs. My heart raced as I clutched the stack of evidence I had compiled over the past weeks. This was it, the moment I had been fighting for. I scanned the room, noting the faces of the grieving families, including Mark, his eyes darkened with pain and anger. He had been my ally in this fight, sharing in the burden of loss. I knew how much he wanted answers, but I also sensed the storm brewing within him. As the hearing commenced, the Carnival owner, a tall man with slicked back hair and an air of arrogance, sat at the front, flanked by his legal team. He wore a smirk that made my stomach churn. I cleared my throat and stepped forward, the spotlight almost blinding me. I raised my voice to address the panel, my hands trembling slightly as I laid out the evidence of the safety violations. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, the Ferris wheel that collapsed was known to be unsafe months prior to the disaster. I have documents here, I gestured to the papers in my hand, that prove the Carnival management ignored repeated warnings from safety inspectors. A murmur rippled through the crowd, and I caught Mark's intent gaze. I pushed through the anxiety coursing through me, determined to expose the truth. This negligence cost lives, 3 innocent lives, including that of a young girl who should have been safe in her father's arms. The Carnival owner's smirk faltered, replaced by a mask of indignation. This is ridiculous, he barked, his voice booming across the room. You're trying to pin this on me based on hearsay and the ramblings of a disgruntled ex-employee. You have no proof. I took a deep breath, steeling myself against his intimidation. I do have proof, and the truth is coming out, I shot back, the fire in my belly igniting. You can't deflect blame anymore. The people deserve to know what really happened. Then, just as I thought I had the upper hand, a figure stepped forward from the shadows, the whistleblower. He was a disheveled man, eyes wide with fear and determination. I have something to say, he declared, his voice shaky but resolute. The room fell silent as he addressed the panel. I worked for the Carnival for years. I raised concerns about the Ferris wheel's safety, but they were always ignored. I got fed up and decided to speak out, but I didn't just whistle blow. His voice trembled, and I could see the weight of his confession pressing down on him. I sabotaged the Ferris wheel. I wanted revenge for what happened to my sister. Gasps filled the room, and I felt the blood drain from my face. I turned to Mark, who was now standing, fists clenched at his sides. You did what? He shouted, his voice echoing with disbelief and fury. You put lives at risk for your vendetta? The whistleblower hung his head, tears glistening in his eyes. I thought if I could make them pay it would mean something. But all I did was cause more pain. Chaos erupted as the Carnival owner's smirk returned, a twisted satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. You see, he shouted, pointing at the whistleblower. This is a personal vendetta. You're trying to ruin my reputation over some petty grudge. Mark surged forward, his rage palpable. You're the one who should be held responsible. You allowed this to happen. You let my daughter ride on that death trap. Before he could reach the Carnival owner, police officers intervened, grabbing Mark's arms and pulling him back. Sir, calm down, one of them shouted as Mark struggled against their grip. You need to step back. I watched helplessly as Mark's fury turned to despair. I just want justice for my daughter, he cried, the anguish in his voice piercing my heart. The room was a cacophony of outrage and confusion, but I felt like I had just witnessed the unraveling of everything we had fought for. As the panel called for order, I realized that the truth had come at a cost. The carnival owner would be arrested, but the damage was done. The whistleblower's confession had shifted the narrative, leaving Mark and the other victims' families with nothing but more questions and heartache. When the hearing concluded, I found Mark sitting alone on a bench outside the auditorium, his shoulders slumped. I sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his back. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, my heart heavy with empathy. He turned to me, tears welling in his eyes. "What does it matter now? I thought we were going to get justice, but all we have is this mess. My daughter, she's still fighting for her life, and I don't know if I can do this anymore." The weight of his despair settled over me like a thick fog. "We'll keep fighting, Mark. For her. For all of them. We can't let their memories fade away." But as I looked into his eyes, I felt an unsettling realization. The path to justice was murky, and the fight ahead would be far from over. Story 3. The carnival lights danced in the twilight, casting a kaleidoscope of colors over the throngs of people milling about. I could feel the electric buzz of excitement in the air, a palpable energy that thrummed in my veins as I held my daughter Lily's hand. Her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, pulling me toward the Ferris wheel that loomed majestically against the darkening sky. "Mommy, can we ride that one next?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder, reflecting the myriad of lights that blinked and sparkled around us. "Of course, sweet pea," I replied, smiling down at her. "Let's check out the games first." The aroma of popcorn and cotton candy wafted through the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and carnival music. I could feel my heart swell with joy as I watched her bounce on her toes, her face a picture of pure delight. As we wandered through the maze of attractions, I caught glimpses of other families, children darting from one booth to another, squealing with glee. It was a typical night at the carnival, a celebration of joy and innocence. But amidst the laughter and merriment, I couldn't shake an unsettling feeling that lingered just at the edge of my consciousness. It was nothing, I told myself. Just the overactive imagination of a mother. "Look, Mommy," Lily exclaimed, pointing at a clown juggling brightly colored balls. "Can I go watch him?" "Just for a minute," I warned, still holding her hand firmly. As she scampered off, I couldn't help but chuckle at her enthusiasm. My heart swelled with love. She was my everything, my little beacon of light. But as I stood there, watching her with the clown, I noticed a man standing a few feet away, his gaze fixed intently on Lily. He blended into the crowd, wearing a friendly smile, but there was something about the way he watched her that sent a shiver down my spine. I shook my head, dismissing my fears. Perhaps he was just another dad, admiring the joy of childhood. A few minutes later, I called out to Lily, "Hey, it's time to go. Let's get some cotton candy." She turned, her face lighting up with excitement. "Yes, pink or blue?" "Pink, of course." I laughed, leading her through the crowd toward the vendor. As I turned to place our order, I felt a sudden chill wash over me. A few moments passed, and I glanced back to see the clown still juggling, but my heart sank when I realized Lily was no longer at my side. "Lily?" I called, my voice trembling slightly. No response. My stomach twisted into knots as I scanned the area, my heart pounding in my chest. "Lily, where are you?" Panic set in, and I rushed back through the crowd, calling her name louder, desperation clawing at my throat. The laughter and music that had once filled me with joy now felt like a distant echo, swallowed by the growing dread that wrapped around me like a suffocating fog. I approached the clown, my breath quickening. "Have you seen a little girl? She's 5, wearing a pink dress." The clown shook his head, his painted smile faltering. "Sorry, lady. Can't say I have." I forced a smile, though my heart raced. "Thank you," I muttered, moving on, searching frantically. I could feel the eyes of strangers on me, their faces morphing from joy to concern. "Lily!" I shouted again, my voice breaking as the crowd continued to swirl like an unpredictable tempest. My heart sank deeper with each passing moment, the vibrant colors of the carnival fading into a nightmare hue. I approached a nearby game booth where a couple of workers were chatting. "Have you seen a little girl? She's about this tall," I gestured, my hands shaking. "She has brown hair and a pink dress." They exchanged worried glances. "No, ma'am. But we can help you look," one of them offered, and I nodded, clinging to the hope that we would find her. As the minutes stretched into an eternity, I felt the world around me blur, the laughter of the carnival fading into an ominous silence. My heart raced as I envisioned every horrible scenario. She can't be far, I whispered to myself, trying to cling to the last threads of hope. But as I turned back to the crowd once more, an unshakable dread settled over me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to unfold. The vibrant atmosphere of the carnival had morphed into a chaotic nightmare. I stood frozen for a moment, my heart racing as the realization of Lily's disappearance sank in. Panic surged through me like a tidal wave, threatening to drown my resolve. I could hear the frantic calls of carnival workers and worried parents echoing around me, their voices tinged with desperation. "Lily, where are you?" I heard a man shout, his voice cracking with fear. I joined in, my voice rising above the din. "Lily, sweetheart, where are you?" The sounds of laughter and music that had once filled the air now felt like a cruel joke, a mocking reminder of the joy that had been so abruptly shattered. "Did you see her?" "A little girl about this tall with blonde hair," I asked a nearby carnival worker, my voice trembling. He shook his head, his eyes wide with concern. "No, ma'am, I haven't seen her. We need to call the police." As the words left his lips, a knot twisted in my stomach. The police. The mere thought of involving them made the reality of the situation hit even harder. I could already envision the flashing lights and the gathering crowd, a scene that would soon become a grim spectacle. Every second felt like an eternity as I continued to search, weaving through the throngs of people, calling out her name, hoping against hope that she would come running back to me, her face lit up with joy. "Where did she go? Just a moment ago she was right here," I heard a mother say, her voice rising above the rest. I turned to see her gripping her son's hand tightly, her eyes wild with fear. "We must find them," she urged, her breath coming in desperate gasps. "Lily," I shouted again, my voice hoarse now. The search intensified, every face morphing into a blur of worry and dread. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest as I ran from one attraction to another, the bright lights and cheerful music now a cruel contrast to the panic swelling in me. "Ma'am," a police officer called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Is this your daughter?" He held up a picture of Lily, a beaming smile captured in time, frozen in innocence. I gasped, shaking my head. "No, that's not her. We need to keep looking." I felt the urge to scream, to shake someone until they understood the urgency of the situation. Hours passed, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the carnival, an unsettling silence fell. The joyful laughter that once filled the air had faded into an oppressive stillness. I could see the flickering lights of the rides casting long shadows on the ground, each one a reminder of the happiness that had been stolen from us. The local news had arrived, their cameras rolling as they set up to broadcast Lily's picture to the world. "We live here at the Austin Carnival, where a frantic search is underway for a missing 5-year-old girl. Authorities are urging anyone with information to come forward," the reporter said, her voice steady but her eyes betraying the gravity of the situation. "Where could she be?" I whispered to myself, feeling hollow and desperate. The world felt as if it were closing in on me, the walls of uncertainty tightening around my chest. My mind raced with horrifying possibilities, each one worse than the last. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking just beyond the lights, hidden within the shadows. Then the next day arrived with a cruel twist. The sun rose over the town with a false sense of hope, and as the search party gathered, I stood among them, my heart heavy with dread. "We have to find her," I murmured, clenching my fists. But deep down I feared what we would uncover. As we combed through the nearby fields, I felt a chill run down my spine. The hushed whispers among the searchers filled me with unease. What if she's hurt? What if... A woman's voice trailed off, the unspoken words hanging heavily in the air. And then it happened. I saw them, the figures in the distance, standing with their backs to me. Something primal in my gut told me it was bad news. I took a step forward, dread pooling in my stomach as they turned, their faces pale and drawn. "Please, no," I cried, collapsing to my knees as the reality hit me like a freight train. They were shaking their heads, and in that moment I knew. I had lost my daughter. The world around me faded into a blur as I was engulfed by darkness, the chilling truth washing over me like a cruel tide. The air was thick with dread as I settled into my chair at the precinct, the weight of Lily's disappearance pressing down on my chest like a heavy shroud. The bright lights of the carnival flickered in my mind, a stark contrast to the darkness of the reality we now faced. My fingers tapped nervously on the desk, sifting through the evidence. A collection of witness statements, security footage, and a growing list of potential leads that felt more like dead ends. Detective Miller, the voice of my partner, Officer Jenkins, broke through my thoughts. "We've got a promising lead." He leaned over my shoulder, excitement flickering in his eyes. A woman reported seeing a man with a tattoo on his arm lingering near the children's rides. Said he was acting strange watching the kids. I looked up, my heart quickening. What kind of tattoo? Something distinctive, like a skull or a serpent. Do we have a description? I asked, immediately pulling out a notepad. Not much. Just that he was tall, maybe 6 feet, and had dark hair. But the tattoo, it stood out. I nodded, my mind racing. This could be the break we needed. I grabbed my jacket and moved toward the door. Let's get a sketch artist in here. We need to circulate this description to the local news stations and social media. As we headed out to the parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling of urgency that gripped me. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the city, but it felt like a deceptive facade hiding the real horror beneath. We drove through the streets of Austin, the vibrant carnival lights now a haunting reminder of the joy that had been so cruelly snatched away. Do you think it's him? Jenkins asked, his voice steady but tinged with concern. I don't know, I admitted, staring out the window at the familiar streets. But we have to follow every lead. We owe it to Lily. The thought of her parents, their faces twisted in anguish as they searched for their little girl, propelled me forward. I needed to find this monster before he could do it again. Arriving back at the precinct, I found a flurry of activity. Officers were buzzing around, their voices a mix of urgency and despair. I settled at my desk, focusing on the growing pile of paperwork. The sketch artist worked diligently, capturing the essence of the suspect based on the witness's description. Detective Miller, a voice called out, pulling me from my thoughts. It was Officer Ramirez, his face flushed with excitement. You need to see this. I followed him down the hall, my heart racing. He led me to a room filled with monitors displaying security footage from the carnival. I squinted at the screens, trying to make sense of the chaotic images. Look here, he pointed to a frame that showed a tall figure lingering near the Ferris wheel, the distinct tattoo barely visible on his arm. We ran the footage from the carnival. It looks like he was there the whole time. Can we zoom in? I asked, my pulse quickening. Ramirez pressed a few buttons and the image sharpened. There it was, the serpent tattoo coiling around the man's forearm, a sinister emblem against the backdrop of bright carnival colors. I felt a chill run down my spine. Get this out to the public. We need to find him, now, I ordered, determination flooding through me. As the footage circulated, I reached out to the witness again, hoping to gather more details. What was he doing? I asked her over the phone, my voice steady. Did you see him interacting with any children? She hesitated, fear evident in her voice. He just watched. I thought it was odd, but with so many people around, I didn't think much of it. Thank you, I said, hanging up. The unease in her tone confirmed my fears. This man wasn't just watching, he was hunting. The night wore on as we continued piecing together the puzzle. I felt the weight of the community's grief and anger push against me, urging me not to give up. I interviewed more carnival goers, scouring for every detail, every fragment of information that could lead us to Lily's abductor. The ghost of her laughter lingered in the air, a haunting reminder of innocence lost. Detective, Jenkins interrupted, his voice tense. We've got a hit on the tattoo. A guy matching the description was seen at a bar downtown last night. Let's go, I said, adrenaline surging through my veins. Time to unmask this monster. As we raced toward the bar, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were getting closer, but I also knew that with each tick of the clock, the stakes grew higher. The community was reeling, and the shadow of the predator loomed larger with each passing moment. The tension in the air was palpable as I stood outside the command center, a temporary setup in an old community center that had been transformed into a hub of frantic activity. I could hear the muffled sounds of voices, some urgent, others resigned, but all filled with a singular purpose: to find Lily and bring her home. My heart raced with each passing moment, knowing that every second counted in the desperate search for the little girl who had vanished into thin air. Sarah. My partner, Detective James Carter, called me over, urgency etched on his face. We've got a lead on Jensen's last known location. The FBI just sent over some intel. He handed me a folder, his hands slightly trembling. I opened it, scanning the details. He was spotted in a park just outside of town last night? My voice was steady, but inside, a storm raged. We need to mobilize a team immediately. Already on it, James replied, his eyes narrowing. But we need to be careful. This guy is dangerous and knows how to slip through the cracks. I nodded, my mind racing with thoughts of the parents, the community, their anguish mirrored in my own heart. The image of Lily's smiling face haunted me. She deserved to be found, to be safe again. Let's get the local cops involved and set up a perimeter. We can't let him slip away again. Minutes later we were on our way, a convoy of cars racing toward the park. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows that felt ominous against the backdrop of the fading light. My stomach twisted with anxiety, but I pushed it down, focusing on the task at hand. We couldn't afford to fail. As we arrived, I scanned the area, taking note of the various families scattered around, children laughing and playing, blissfully unaware of the danger lurking nearby. It was a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. James spread the officers out. We need eyes everywhere, I instructed, my voice clipped with determination. He nodded and moved to brief the officers while I began to canvass the area. I approached a couple sitting on a bench, their eyes wide with concern. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my tone calm, "have you seen this man?" I showed them a recent photo of Jensen. They shook their heads, but I could see the concern etched on their faces deepening. "We heard about the little girl," the woman said, her voice trembling. "It's so frightening. We were just saying we should keep a closer eye on our kids." I gave them a tight smile. "We're doing everything we can. If you see anything suspicious, please call us." I moved on, the weight of their fear settling heavily on my shoulders. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie twilight over the park, we received a call over the radio. "All units, we have a visual on the suspect." The voice crackled through the speaker, sending adrenaline surging through me. "He's headed toward the abandoned warehouse on the east side of the park." "Let's go," I shouted, sprinting toward the nearest patrol car, my heart pounding in my chest. The team quickly mobilized and we raced through the park, lights flashing, sirens blaring. When we reached the warehouse, my instincts flared. It was dark and foreboding, a relic of a time long past. "Stay sharp," I ordered as we approached the entrance. He could be armed and desperate. We moved in a tight formation, approaching the door cautiously. I could feel the tension building, the anticipation of finally confronting the man who had wreaked havoc on our community. "Carter, take the left side." "I'll go right," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. As we entered the dimly lit interior, my heart felt like it might burst from my chest. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. "Mark Jensen," I called out, my voice echoing through the vast emptiness. "We know you're in here. Come out with your hands up." Silence enveloped us, stretching uncomfortably as we moved deeper into the warehouse. My mind raced, analyzing every creak and whisper. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught my eye. "Over there," I shouted, pointing toward a dark corner. We advanced, weapons drawn, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Just as we rounded the corner, I caught a glimpse of a figure darting away. "Stop!" I yelled, but he was already slipping through another door, his figure vanishing into the shadows. "Carter, he's getting away." I sprinted after him, my heart racing with desperation. We burst out of the back exit and I could see him ahead, weaving through the maze of abandoned crates. "We can't let him escape." "Sarah, wait!" James yelled, but I was already in motion, fueled by a mix of determination and fear. Suddenly, I noticed a piece of paper fluttering on the ground where Jensen had just been, a taunting note left behind as he slipped through our grasp. I picked it up, my hands shaking as I read the chilling words scrawled in a hastily written script. "You'll never find me, and the hunt has only just begun." My breath caught in my throat. What had I just stumbled into? The reality of the threat was more profound than I had imagined, and as I looked up, the shadows of the warehouse seemed darker, more sinister. This was only the beginning. I leaned back in my chair, the dim light of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the cluttered surface. The photographs spread before me felt like a heavy weight, each one a reminder of the innocence lost, of the laughter that had been silenced too soon. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind of emotions that threatened to engulf me. This wasn't just a case anymore, it was personal. The name Mark Jensen sent chills down my spine, and the realization that he had once been my neighbor gnawed at me like a relentless predator. "Sarah, you okay?" my partner Jake asked, his voice cutting through the tense silence. His brow furrowed with concern as he leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. I nodded, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Just going through the files again. I can't shake the feeling that there's something we're missing." Jake stepped into the room, his footsteps soft on the worn carpet. "You've been at this for hours. Maybe we should take a break." "A break? We don't have time for breaks, Jake." "I snapped, frustration bubbling over." I quickly softened my tone, realizing the edge in my voice. "I'm sorry. It's just, the more I dig into his past, the more I see how twisted he is. And the thought that he could strike again? My voice trailed off, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. He nodded, understanding etched in his features. I know. But we need to keep our heads clear. What's the latest on the tip? I glanced at the notes scattered across my desk. A witness claimed to have seen him near the park last night. There's a chance he's planning something. Then we need to move fast, Jake replied, determination flashing in his eyes. We can't let another child become a victim. As we gathered the necessary files and gear, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me. Every second counted. The clock was ticking, and the thought of failing to protect another innocent life made my stomach churn. We rushed to the car, the night air cool against my skin, a stark contrast to the heat of urgency that enveloped us. Where do you think he could be hiding? Jake asked, his hands gripping the wheel tightly as we navigated the dark streets of Austin. Based on his history, I'm betting he's looking for somewhere secluded, I replied, my mind racing through the possible locations. The old warehouse district on the outskirts of town could be a likely spot. Let's check it out, Jake said, his voice steady. As we approached the warehouse, a sense of dread washed over me. I could feel it in my bones. This was where the nightmare would unfold. The building loomed over us, its windows dark and hollow, like the eyes of a predator waiting in the shadows. Stay alert, I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest as we exited the car. The air was thick with tension, every creak of the old building echoing like a warning. We moved cautiously, flashlights illuminating the darkness. The musty scent of decay hung in the air, a grim reminder of the horrors that could have taken place within these walls. Over here, I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I spotted a door slightly ajar. Jake nodded, and we approached silently, the anticipation hanging heavily between us. As we pushed the door open, my breath caught in my throat. Inside was a hidden room filled with photographs, dozens of them, pinned to the walls like trophies. God, no, I gasped, the realization crashing over me. Each photograph was a child, each face a haunting reminder of lives stolen. Among them, my eyes locked onto a familiar face, Lily. The air felt suffocating, the walls closing in as the full weight of what Mark had done crashed down on me. No, this can't be real, Jake breathed, stepping closer to examine the photos. He's been doing this for years. I felt the bile rise in my throat, the horror of the situation pressing down on me. We have to find him, Jake. Now, before he can hurt anyone else. As I took a step back, I could almost hear the laughter of the children in the photographs, a chilling reminder of the joy that had been snatched away. This was more than just a case. It was a race against time, and I was determined to end it once and for all. The dim light of the abandoned warehouse flickered ominously as I crept through the corridor, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. Every step felt heavy, laden with the weight of the countless lives affected by Mark Jensen's monstrous acts. I could hear his maniacal laughter echoing off the concrete walls, a sound so chilling it sent shivers down my spine. I was close now, closer than I had ever been to the man who had shattered the lives of so many, including Lily's. Detective Miller, he sneered, his voice dripping with mockery. You really think you can stop me? You're just a woman playing a man's game. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to remain calm. I'm not here to play games, Mark. You've hurt too many people, and it's time to face justice. Justice? He laughed again, the sound echoing in the shadows. Justice is just a word. Look around you, Sarah. You think your precious community is safe? They don't even know the real monster lurking among them. I stepped forward, my resolve hardening. I know what you are. And I know about the network you're a part of. This ends tonight. His laughter faded, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. You think you're so clever. But I've been one step ahead of you all along. You're too late to save the others. Seething with rage, I lunged at him. The struggle was fierce, a chaotic dance of desperation and fury. I could feel his hands gripping my wrists, his strength surprising for a man of his stature. You should have stayed away, little detective, he spat, his breath hot against my face. You have no idea what you're dealing with. With a surge of adrenaline, I twisted free and tackled him to the ground. The impact rattled me, but I couldn't let up. He was a predator, and I was determined to bring him down. You're going to pay for what you've done, I growled, pinning him beneath me. I'll never tell you anything, he hissed, defiance burning in his eyes. I pressed my weight into him, feeling the cold concrete against my palms. You think this is over? You're just the tip of the iceberg. I'll make sure you talk. As the adrenaline coursed through my veins, I managed to restrain his arms with the handcuffs I had fished from my belt. The moment I secured him, I felt an overwhelming sense of victory, though it was quickly overshadowed by the horror of what I had encountered. Detective, he said, his tone shifting from defiance to something almost conspiratorial. You may have caught me, but my friends are still out there. You're fighting a losing battle. I narrowed my eyes at him. What do you mean? Who are they? He just smiled, a twisted grin that sent a fresh wave of unease through me. You'll see. They're everywhere, hiding in plain sight. And they'll continue to take what they want, regardless of the law. The sirens blared in the distance, growing louder as backup arrived. My heart raced, not just from the confrontation but from the chilling realization that Mark was right. This wasn't just about him, it was about a whole network of predators preying on the innocent. Mark Jensen, I said, locking eyes with him, you're going to rot in prison, and I'll make sure they know about your twisted friends. As the officers burst through the door, I stepped back, allowing them to take over. I watched as they led him away, his laughter echoing in my mind long after he disappeared from view. The aftermath of the confrontation weighed heavily on me. I was a protector, a guardian of the innocent, but I felt the shadows of despair closing in. As I stared out into the darkened street, I realized the true horror was not just in the monsters we caught, but in the countless others still lurking, hidden in the cracks of our society. Sarah, one of my colleagues, called, pulling me from my thoughts. We need to discuss the next steps. There's a lot we need to uncover. I nodded, determination settling in my chest. We need to dig deeper. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. And as the night swallowed Austin in its embrace, I knew that the battle against the darkness was only just beginning.